Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Sweet.
So, hi. My name's Ryan.
Hi, my name's Kuna.
Cool. Um, so the way
Nice to
this,
meet you, man.
nice to meet you too. Yeah. So the way that this normally works is, I'll ask questions, of course, and you can answer them, or you can speak about anything else you want to. It's all being recorded, um,
For sure.
and then the transcribed version in the magazine will be available. In your case, probably in July 1st.
Okay.
And then the audio will be released on the YouTube channel uh, later that month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So let's start easy. What's your name and where are you?
My name is Kuna or Matt, either one. I'm currently in upstate New York, originally from Northern Virginia, resided in Savannah, Georgia for the majority of everything Cunabear, pretty much. But I've been in upstate New York for just under a year.
I see. And when did you start Cunabear project?
Cunabear started officially in 2014. Um, I had been dabbling in a lot of different genres for a long period of time. I originally started out as punk. I was doing a lot of punk rock stuff. I was in a bunch of bands. I was in some metal bands, like high school, college days. I did some funk stuff. But Cunabear kind of formed around 2014.
Gotcha. And where did you get your sound from? Because it's a pretty unique approach.
Thanks. I think honestly, it's just from having all of those previous experiences in music, trying to combine the best of all of the things that I like about hip hop alongside the things that I like about psychedelic music and progressive rock and progressive. Um, I try to incorporate as much as I can into a hip hop structure, or I guess like a hip hop framework, state of mind, however you want to think of it. And and then I try to just blend those genres as smoothly as what feels appropriate to whatever song I'm working on.
Okay, sure. So maybe let's get a little bit into your background.
Definitely.
You said you were born in Virginia.
Yeah.
Did you spend much
Yeah.
time there?
I was born and raised in Northern Virginia. I pretty much was there until I was almost 19, 20-ish. And around that time, I decided to relocate to Savannah. I had another friend of mine and a collaborator friend of mine who he and his family had moved to Savannah about a year and a half before I decided that I wanted to get out of Virginia and try something new. And so I moved in with him, and that was kind of the early years of Cunabear. Originally, I was going by the name Spooky Tooth, but then I found out that there's a band from like the 70s who was really heavy on their name and the licensing for all of that type of stuff. Even though we were in different genres and I spelled things differently, it was like trying to make sure that no one's feels like I'm stepping on their toes. And try not to get sued. So I switched my name over to Kuna Bear, which I had been using for like my graffiti and my visual art. I've been a graffiti artist and a graphic designer and a painter and illustrator for pretty much my whole life. And Kuna Bear had been like my art name for a minute. So
Yeah.
I just kind of combined all my forces together, tried to combine all the genres I like together and, build like my own personal melting pot of creativity.
so you
And it branched out from there. Yeah.
so you were already playing music before you went to Savannah.
Yeah. I've been into kind of every kind of creativity and art that there can be my whole life. I've been experimenting, I guess, with just tapping into different stuff. I did pottery and stuff as a kid. I painted a lot. And so when I hit middle school, I got my first guitar, and that kind of took me on my musical journey. I learned guitar first, then bass, then drums. I played a little bit of horns, like I could play a little bit of trombone and a little bit of trumpet. I can't really call myself a pianist, but I can definitely mess around on the keys enough to get a good melody or
Hmm.
something that I can loop,
Very cool.
Um, I experimented with it all. And yeah, that's kind of where Cunabear comes from. It's just like the refinement of that
Got you.
expression. Yeah.
So were your parents very musical? Did either of them play instruments at all?
No. My mom sang a little bit in her church choir growing up, but she never necessarily took it seriously. I would say that she's a really good singer, but she doesn't consider herself one. Neither of them are, like creatively inclined in the intentional sense, I suppose.
Right. Yeah,
It's just me.
I'm always interested in how people start creating. You
I
know.
was kind of the black sheep of my family, to be honest.
Yeah.
There weren't really notable creative endeavors from anybody in my family before me. And since I was growing up, some of my younger cousins kind of picked up on what I was doing and took their own paths with it. But
Cool.
yeah, in a way, I kind of had an origin point situation going on with the creativity in my family.
All right. So like how old were you? You said you played guitar musically first before you did anything else. How old were you when you started doing that?
I was about 10.
Oh wow. You grabbed it young.
I was about 10 when I first started. I didn't start taking it extremely seriously, like dedicated to the craft of just improving on it as a musician. Excuse me. Until I was about 13. But from 10 to 13, I was just trying to learn songs that I liked from like Blink 182. You know what I mean? It was just like whatever was the simple, most like accessible punk rock. Mostly because punk rock not only appealed to me energetically and through the messaging, but it was accessible. It was like the barrier of entry is the desire to try
Yeah.
to be a part of your community
Right.
in a way that is at the very least net neutral. Like you're not trying to be a jerk, you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
people are supposed to be open to you being yourself and expressing yourself as freely as possible. And that really clicked with me. So I was like, okay, if I can learn this as a building block, I can do anything. And so that's kind of the mindset that I took with guitar for a while.
That's the best part of the punk ethos, I think. It's like anybody
You
can do it.
know?
So
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily walk from any place. You can kind of come in whenever you feel like you want to try. And I thought that
exactly.
that was really appealing.
And did you play out? Did you play shows while you were in Virginia?
There weren't a lot of shows to be had, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I kind of lived in this suburban zone in between Richmond and DC, where there was a lot of like government families and military families whose kids had nowhere to go and nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't necessarily in the position of like having bars or clubs or anywhere to really even play that was in our town. We would have to like get someone's parents to drive us to the next county over
Yeah, I
or
got
the
you.
next city over in order to get shows. And even then, a lot of the time, they're like, you guys are underage, so we can't like
Mm.
let you play really.
Yeah,
But
that's always.
we did have a couple of experiences though. We got to play a lot of house shows because of it.
Yeah,
I actually threw one for my 16th birthday that turned into like a mini festival. It was a little insane
cool.
looking back on it.
I love
We had
house
like
shows.
five bands play and we were all like, high schoolers and middle schoolers. And so we're all just kind of getting together and I organized the whole thing and didn't realize how much that would play into my life as an adult, but organizing those house shows and we even got to play in a couple churches that were like trying to ban us from performing metal music and we would get in there and start moshing and they'd be if you guys mosh or scream at any more songs, we're gonna cut the power. And we're
Oh,
like,
jeez.
so this next song is called "Fuck Your Mother" and blah blah. Just fucking go fuck off. And we always just make space. You know, that was a big lesson for me growing up. Was like, they're not always going to be given room to perform. You're going to have to learn how to busk. You're going to have to learn how to get in where you fit in. You're going to have to learn how to make space for you and other people like you, because there's not always going to be some place that's already predefined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you kept saying we, like, I assume you collaborated with other people? Um,
Yeah, there were just a bunch of other local bands built out of other kids who kind of had the same thing that me and my friends had going on, where it's like, none of our families really want us to play heavy metal, so they're not encouraging us. They just kind of tolerate the fact that we all have music as a hobby, and they're like, yeah, hopefully they'll turn this into something because it's such an expensive hobby. Like, we would, organize together at the lunch table at school and be like, all right, so we're all gonna like say we're going to our friend's house and we're gonna actually meet up at Jimmy's house while his parents are out of town. And we're gonna throw a show in the backyard, and we got to keep the volume down to a certain point so the cops don't get called, and just like figuring all this shit out when we were, like 15, 16, really built a foundation for me as a person, because I feel like it pushed me in the direction of being community oriented without realizing it.
Absolutely. Now, did you mostly play solo, or did you have like a group of people that you would often play with?
I had a couple of specific bands that I was in constant rotation with. They were like my best friends would have their own bands, and their bandmates would have friends who have their own bands, and we would all kind of connect together. It was also like the foundations of what would eventually become the Beartooth Collective, which is a art and music collective that I'm currently running
Oh, right
and
on.
a part of. And a lot of it was built in those early days. We didn't really have a name for it back then. We were kind of just all meeting up together, but we would meet up together. And then when we didn't have shows, we would just get together at each other's houses, and like our parents would probably call it a house party or whatever, but in reality, it was us like low key learning how to network with one another and figure out like what bigger bands who are touring through the area are doing, so we can try to mimic them or
Yeah.
get on shows with these people. Once we hit like 16, 17, 18, we were able to go to this place that was 2 counties over called Jack's. And it was this like rundown dive bar, but they would have all these huge metal acts come and play because there was nowhere else to play in between Richmond and DC in this specific direction. So like we'd get a lot of runoff shows from bands that normally would not want to play to this tiny room full of teenagers, but we would work it out to where we'd have to do the whole pay as you played bullshit. But we would get to play
Yeah.
with these big bands and have photos with these enormous acts like Meshuggah, and we'd be opening with our little bullshit. It was like, not that any of it was bad, but like, in comparison to high schoolers who are figuring out how to be a band for the first time, these bands that have been playing for at that point like 10, almost 15 years, it's like they're grown adults. It's a world of a difference, but that experience changed so much of the trajectory for so many of us, myself included, definitely.
Nice, nice, nice. So, tell me more about the Beartooth Collective. Do you have like a particular mission with that, or a particular group of collaborators with that? How's it work?
So there's a mission that exists, and then there's a lot of open space that also exists, because from the beginning I always just wanted the idea of something that could carry on that punk rock ethos that I mentioned, and also carry through like what the modern age of hip hop and independent music, especially in general, is going through. Um, I I kind of listened to a lot of shit when I was in high school, and so I blended in with a lot of different crowds of people. I was able to end up in a lot of different types of places, and always found that like there was always somebody like me who was super creative and just couldn't find themselves a group of people around them to like share information with or get, any kind of a leg up and just figuring stuff out as teenagers and young adults. Um, and so I started getting everybody together at my house, and we would, sneak out to my backyard and smoke weed and then come back inside the house, and we would just paint together. We would talk about all these concepts and ideas we had. We would start the beginning of what was really us writing our first albums and recordings using my MacBook that my parents had given me as like a graduation present. I'm like
Nice.
trying to just figure out how DAWs work and figure out how hardware works and figure out what cables I need for what, and spending endless hours in Guitar Center just bugging people for questions. And on the other side of the technical side of things, I'm listening to people like Tyler the Creator, who's like getting this total MySpace world start on the internet alone. And I'm seeing people like Bus Driver and Rap Ferreira and Aesop Rock, who are huge influences of mine that were like figuring out how to do this shit without anyone's help on certain levels. And I just kind of started to piece things together and find the other people who I knew that were looking for that information and share it with them. And then it moved to me like when Facebook started getting big, I was sharing other people's Facebook pages to my personal Facebook profile, because I didn't know how like making a Facebook page worked yet. So I'm just sharing people's stuff and I'm sharing people's stuff and I'm doing this for years. I'm just sharing videos that I like, and people start like, not necessarily tuning in to see, but every time I'm crossing somebody's feed, people are paying attention. And so when I'm sharing stuff that's like local level music, the people who I'm sharing are starting to thank me because it's like, hey, you're one of the only people in this particular space that's shouting me out. I appreciate that you're, putting eyes in my direction and things of that nature. And so I was like, I kind of wish I could start a record label without having to do all of the industry bullshit that comes with a record label. I don't want to have to deal with an HR team. I don't want to have to deal with like putting people into contracts and then they had to get loaned money and deal with the whole I just didn't want to deal with any of that shit. And so I was like, what if I just made it so that the people who want in make the rules for what they want, and all I do is follow the syllabus, like base it on whatever it is that the artist needs instead of basing it off of like what my experience tells me about anything that's not relative to them asking me for advice on a specific thing that they think I can help them with. What if I start to like aggregate all the information I have and start to find ways to network it so that the people who need it can get it, um,
Got you. So let
and
me
and doing all that stuff by myself.
so let me ask you: is there like a list of specific artists that you have worked with?
Yeah. So there's specifically there's people like Joaquin Fox and Virgil Wolf, Lady Valor, Wormwood Noah, Mantis the Miasma, Ishtar Senior. Um, there's a lot of people who I've worked with in ancillary ways where it's like I've played a show with McKinley Dixon at a house show, and because of that event, we were able to meet up and become friends, and I was able to give him a place to crash while he was in the midst of playing a tour that was local to the town that I was living in. And that allowed for me to meet other people that I was able to help get shows in other places and help get tours for other places. Um, it's one of those things where it's like you put in a lot of quiet work, and it's not necessarily stuff that's like there to be bragged about, but it's work that I feel has been sustainable for the people who it helps when it helps them the most.
Okay, very
Like for
cool.
example, I have a friend named Key Avil who's up in Canada. They are extremely talented, and there's been a number of times where they just needed not even necessarily to have a show come through, but just someone who is able and willing to like help authenticate their travel visa, their work visa, so that they could come into the States and perform a show, um, and put on, something that could help them continue their career forward. And now they're still, they're still climbing and doing greater things in their own spaces too. A lot of work like that. And I don't necessarily restrict myself to a genre. Hip hop and like experimental music is kind of where our bread and butter lies. We've got some noise and glitch artists. We've got some people who sing, but we also we kind of incorporate whoever is willing and feeling like they need us to help them out. I've helped math rock bands get cassette tapes made. I've booked shows for people like SB the Moor. I've been able to just help people. I feel like that's, where my strength lies when it comes to the auxiliary outside of my music.
Got you. So let's talk about Cunabear some more. Um,
Definitely.
so when did you start Cunabear? How many years ago? And how many albums would you say you've put out?
So I started Cunabear in 2014, May 15th. I released my first EP. It's called Gold Version. I'm a huge Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal fan, so I was like, I'm gonna do this thing where I drop Gold Version and then Silver Version, and then Crystal Version will be my first like album length release. That didn't end up happening. I ended up dropping 9 mixtapes in 2014 to 2015. Um, they're all somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour long. And then I dropped Crystal Version. Crystal Version was the last time that I named myself Spooky Tooth. So the actual Puna Bear half of my discography starts past that point. I'd say that I think I'm on album 42. I think. I literally just finished recording a new album last week.
All right, let's talk
So
about that in just a
I
minute.
had to count that. Yeah,
We'll put a pause on that, and we'll kind of finish with that. But
for sure.
are there any like? It's weird to ask about your own music, but are there any like
No, it's
highlights, like
okay.
particular albums that you think that you like the best that you've done?
Absolutely. There's a lot of highlights for me personally because a lot of my music is pretty self autobiographical. But I would say that some of the more like landmark albums out of my discography so far are records that include what's it called? It's called Bad Fur Day, all one word. Um, there's Zen Garden. That's an earlier mixtape as well. That's one that I toured on for my very first tour ever. And as that record comes out, we're on the road. When the record is done and the album is out, we're in the middle of Taos, New Mexico. I had blacked out from heat exhaustion. uh, and I'm like getting all these notifications from people who are like, this record's so great, this record's so great. And I'm like, I literally passed out on the floor, not even able to answer anybody. And then while I'm on that tour, I'm writing its follow-up record, which is called the Mookie Tape, Mookie, the Mookie Tape. That record got my first notable outside press from Dead End Hip Hop. Shout out to Dead End Hip Hop. Mike Seatown specifically was somebody who gave me a chance and really enjoyed the record. Shout out to Big Stowe for, he was the person who got me in touch with them by way of I believe I paid him for press release help. That record did a lot for me and it was able to push me farther as far as just being able to be recognized by people and able to get more shows and things of that nature. Um, the next big record that I would say for me was called Big Sun King. Shout out to my friend Vast Ness, who produced that album entirely. And that album got me to go on tour up to Portland, Maine and back. We had a hell of a time.
Hell yeah!
It was also a record that another one that kind of elevated me as far as people's perception of my music. And also, I think personally, my own craft as far as being a writer definitely hit a level up around that time. Um, and
Excellent.
then the last records that I would have to shout out would be the Steel Tipped Bear's Claw trilogy so far. All three of those albums have been extremely unique and special times. There's a lot of other records that I could put out, but
Yeah, that's you got a lot of records, and I invite people to look through your whole discography. Is there a place that they can all be found online?
everything can be found currently on my Bandcamp. It's cunabear.bandcamp.com, cunabear.bandcamp.com. Um, I'm in the process of uploading some stuff to Subvert because I'm really a big fan of the whole co-op movement that they have going on over there. I think that that's a pretty cool idea.
Tell me a little
Um,
bit, just a little bit about that, because that's actually interesting to me. I've not heard of that.
So, from what I understand and from what I've read and did my little bit of research about, the basic idea behind Subvert.fm is that they're trying to be Bandcamp, but it's a co op situation between all the artists who sign up to be on Subvert and to have their music sold on Subvert. Um, and then there's like bonuses and benefits to being a member, even if you're not an artist, but you can still, surf through their shop and buy specific stuff from there. They let you put out music anywhere you want. It's not a situation where they have you under any kind of a contract or anything like that, but they give you incentive for putting out exclusives and they give people discounts if they're members for certain albums, and everything else pretty much operates from what I've experienced the same way that Bandcamp does. I think the only thing that they don't have that might turn people away is an app. Most of the behind the scenes work for artists as far as uploading and whatnot has to be done desktop mode style, which I guess could be a put off for some people, but it doesn't necessarily bother me personally. It's just kind of part of it. Literally just started, so it's just kind of part of the game, is like seeing how things will advance from here. But it seems promising and it seems interesting. I definitely like the idea of co-ownership between all of the artists who are willing to put in their actual hard work. They're taking a really hard no AI stance as well, which is something that really struck me as a positive. Um, those things seem pretty cool over there. I like Bandcamp. I like Audio Mac. Um, I've had an on and off again relationship with streaming services. Currently on streaming, there's only a select handful of albums. I kind of put like what I think are some of the highlight records on my streaming services, and then I put out recently a compilation that's basically all of the greatest hits from all of the albums that I've released up until, I want to say, Steel Tipped Bear's Claw 2, Phantasmagoria. Um,
All right, all right.
everything on there is like it's like been remastered and touched up just enough to sound a little bit more clear and a little bit, a little bit nicer in the headphones. And I kind of have that as like the taste test for people who are interested in my music through streaming. And then I try to refresh my streaming profile pages every so often with a Bandcamp link or my website link, and just be like, yo, if you like what you're hearing and you actually want to support me directly, either come to my website or come to my Bandcamp. They're even interlinked between the two, so you can reach one from the other. And that's the best way to support me directly, so that the people who do see value in that and think that it's worth something more than just the stream, especially now that it's becoming more popularized and understood how much streaming services don't necessarily help the majority of artists, if not most, if not all artists. Not to mention just the weird shit that they be doing behind the scenes. Spotify is doing some weird shit, makes people uncomfortable, makes me as an artist uncomfortable and as a human uncomfortable. So it's like I try to mitigate as much as my time on streaming services as can possibly be. Definitely been deep into my MP3 player, getting back to my physical catalog. So I try to encourage the same out of my fans because I think that's part of, building a fan base that you can feel proud to have people be a part of. You want people to be invited because the music's dope, but it's also like you want them to feel like the community space they're entering by becoming a fan of your shit comes from a good place. And I think that that's important, whatever that looks like for people.
All right. Well, I always have three questions that I run down at the end of these conversations I have people. The first one I think has mostly been covered. Is do you have anything you'd like to promote? But if you'd like to talk about your most recent album in particular, that would be really great.
Yeah. So the record that I just released is called Steel Tipped Bear's Claw 3. The subname is Shifa. That is Urdu for healing or to heal. It's a record that I wrote with a good friend of mine named Steel Tip Dove. Shout out to Fused Arrow Records. They're doing great things. Um, Steel Tip Dove blessed me with the opportunity to come to his studio and record a record directly with him after the first two Steel Tipped Bears Claw records were kind of recorded in a way more separated fashion. And it was a really unique and awesome experience. I'm really, really grateful for it. And we wrote all the music in the spot over like 5 days. I wrote 10 songs just back to back to back. And I'm really, really proud of how they turned out. It's the first record I've ever had on vinyl. Shout out to Elastic Stage. They're out in the UK and they're pressing vinyl up for me and folks that are also in the independent space. And it seems like they're doing good work as far as anyone I've had reviews from is concerned. Their records come out clean and sounded nice. So I'm happy to hear it. And yeah, Chifa, that's the newest record. You can get it on my Bandcamp. You can get it from my website. It has links to everything. There's cassette tapes, CDs, and vinyl records for it.
All right. Question two, and this is an open question. What is most important?
Love. Love is most important. It gives way for all of the other things that we need to be able to build community with one another, including grace and prosperity and peace and empathy and understanding. Love builds the bridge, love builds the foundation, love builds things sturdy, concrete. It allows for life to extend, it allows for health to extend, it allows for grace to be extended. One hand to another is the only way that we're able to build things up. I am because we are, and we can't be without love.
Very nice. And the final question is, was there anything you were hoping I would ask you that I didn't? And if so, you can feel free to talk about it.
Um, I always am curious about what people think of any specific song or lyric. If there was a song or a lyric that stood out to you from the album, I'd be down to talk about it for a quick sec before we have to head off.
Well, I can't say that I have the names memorized off the top of my head, to be fair.
Can't blame you. I give goofy names to my songs. I don't blame you.
But I would say I love the overall vibe of the album. I love that it has a very strong sense of mood to it, and
Mm,
it's not exactly down tempo, but it does have a kind of psychedelic, loungy sort of vibe going throughout it as well that I really enjoy. And so what I liked about it is just the kind of combination of genres that you put together, and it really stood out for me from a lot of the other things that I had to review that month because it just is just a little bit coming from the outside, if that makes
mm,
sense.
it does. I appreciate that. I think that that's definitely a fair assessment of the record. It definitely comes from an outside place. It was really interesting being in the position to write a record of that particular sound design and particular soundscaping while being in New York City in a really tall building that was able to overlook a lot of the city without detracting from the kind of natural soundscapes that exist in that environment. Like, it still made space for you to hear the birds, the trains, the
Hmm.
people, even though, you're kind of so far removed. And then there's just the aspect of like, my Airbnb wasn't close by to where he had his studio at. So I would have to basically go through this like pilgrimage every day. I would have this routine down where I'd like wake up super early, get a coffee, walk around the block just to like be in the city for a minute. Then I'd head back to the place, grab my notebooks, grab my stuff, and then I'd hit the train and I would have to hop over a couple of different trains before I could get to his place. I'm passing all kinds of aspects of the city that I hadn't gotten to see before. And it was really beautiful. It really informed me of how different life can be in different places. And me, as somebody who likes to tour, one of my favorite parts of it is being a stranger in a city and getting to experience, a taste of what certain people's lives might be like to a certain degree if they happen to live on a certain block and had to go from place to place. Like, was really informative of the overall mood. And so the fact that it was complemented with beats that definitely came to a similar place really made the entire situation that much more cohesive. And I think that's definitely why I was able to pump out those songs in such a short amount of time, was because of being surrounded by this kind of energy bubble on all sides, even in the studio space we were working in.
That's really cool, man.
Thank you. It was definitely an experience.
So that's the end of the conversation. Um, if it's at all possible, if you could give me some pictures to include.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I said, I anticipate it'll be in our July edition. There is a small chance it'll be in our August edition. I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I really
Thank you
enjoyed the
for the
conversation.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have a great night.
you as well.
Bye bye.